All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience and all the usual. Secretary General has landed back in New York a few hours ago. He will be back. He will be at headquarters at about 3 o'clock for the resumed session, informal session with the General Assembly on the UN 80 initiative, and that will be webcast for you to watch should you be interested. But as you know, he just landed back from Baghdad in Iraq, where he attended and addressed the summit of the League of Arab States. In the remarks that he delivered, the Secretary General reiterated our constant calls for an urgently needed permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the unconditional release of all hostages, and the need for free flow of humanitarian aid. Only a two-state solution can deliver sustainable peace, he said. He also spoke about the situations in other parts of the region, including Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, Sudan, and Somalia, and underscored the vital partnership between the United Nations and the League of Arab States. On the margins of the summit, he held a trilateral meeting with the chairman of the African Union, Mahmoud Yusuf, and the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Abu Ghait. Their meeting focused on Sudan and how to better cooperate and maintain a regular contact to better coordinate all initiatives in relations to peace in Sudan. He also met with the Prime Minister of Jordan, Jafar Hassan, where they discussed the situation in the region and obviously what is going on in Gaza. Separately, he discussed the situation in Lebanon with Prime Minister Nawaf Salam of Lebanon. On Sunday, he spoke with the Prime Minister of Iraq, Shia al-Sudani, and the Secretary General during those talks reaffirmed that we remain fully committed to continuing to support the government and people of Iraq following the planned departure of the UN assistance mission in Iraq. As you know, the mandate will not be extended beyond December 31st of this year. The Secretary General also addressed the UN staff in Baghdad to express his thanks to them, and he laid a wreath at a memorial at the UN compound in honor of 22 of our colleagues who, as you know, were brutally killed during the terrorist attack on the Canal Hotel back on August 19, 2003. Mr. Guterres said the memorial is a clear reminder of all the vital work that the United Nations does around the world and the dangers our people face in carrying out that work. Turning to Gaza, I can tell you that the Secretary General is alarmed by the intensification of Israeli airstrikes and ground operations in the Gaza Strip, which have resulted in the killings of hundreds of Palestinian civilians in recent days, including many women and children, and of course, large-scale evacuation orders. The Secretary General calls for the rapid, safe, and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance at scale directly to civilians in order to avert famine, alleviate widespread suffering, and prevent further loss of life. The Secretary General continues to call for a permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and welcomes the ongoing efforts by the mediators to reach a deal in Gaza. He has repeatedly warned that the continued violence and the destruction will only compound civilian suffering and heighten the risk of a broader regional conflict. The Secretary General reiterates that civilians must be respected and they must be protected at all times, and that all parties must strictly adhere to their obligations under international humanitarian law. The Secretary General firmly rejects any form of forced displacement of the Palestinian population. And our colleague Tom Fletcher, the emergency relief coordinator, said today in a statement that Israeli authorities have temporarily allowed us to resume resume limited aid delivery into Gaza following 11 weeks of a complete blockade and amid a spike in the military offensive. This is a welcome development that should remain in place. Today, he said 9 of our trucks were cleared to enter via the Karim Shalom crossing, but it is a drop in the ocean of what is urgently needed, and significantly more aid must be allowed into Gaza starting tomorrow morning. Mr. Fletcher said we've been reassured that our work will be facilitated through our existing and proven mechanisms to deliver humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. He said he is determined that our aid reach those in greatest need and that the risk of theft by Hamas or other armed group be minimized. He urged the Israeli authorities to open at least 2 crossings into Gaza, one in the north and one in the south, simplifying, and also urged them to simplify and expedite procedures, remove any quotas, and lift access impediments within Gaza, and not to conduct any attacks in areas and times of deliveries, and allow us to cover a whole range of the huge needs of the Palestinian population in Gaza. To reduce looting, he added, there must be a regular flow of aid and humanitarians must be permitted to use multiple routes. Commercial goods should complement the humanitarian response. Today, Israeli authorities issued a displacement order covering 40 neighborhoods in Khan Yunis, an area encompassing most of the governorate, or about 23% of the whole of the Gaza Strip. It is affecting thousands of people and hundreds of humanitarian facilities, including wells, including pumping stations, including health facilities, and including schools. Overall, almost 500,000 people have been displaced across the Gaza Strip since mid-March. Meanwhile, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that since yesterday, increased heavy shelling and ground advances by Israel have occurred in the north and south of Gaza, killing and injuring many Palestinians, causing mass displacement and additional destruction. Attacks against healthcare facilities continue. Yesterday in North Gaza, the Al-Awada hospital was struck, putting scores of patients and medical staff at risk. In Khan Yunis Governorate, operations at primary healthcare clinics in Al-Qarara and Deir al-Bala were forced to cease operations after the Al-Qarara facility came under direct attack. And today, an Israeli airstrike hit Nasser Hospital, affecting 15 pallets of medical supplies that had been donated by our partners and had been delivered about 3 weeks ago to that hospital. Partners working in water, in sanitation, and hygiene services tell us that in Beit Lahia, solid waste management has come to a halt, with groundwater wells either damaged or non-functional. Water trucking operations have also decreased significantly in the north of the Gaza Strip. Thousands of liters of fuel are needed each week to provide the minimum of water and sanitation services to the population. Meanwhile, Israeli authorities continue to deny attempts for humanitarian movements, including one to retrieve fuel from Rafah, and that was today. A request for the acting humanitarian coordinator, Susanna Takalich, to visit the Gaza European Hospital in Khan Yunis was denied 5 times. Overall, 6 of the 10 coordinated movements were denied today. Moving to Ukraine, and our colleagues there at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that hostilities over the weekend caused dozens of civilian casualties across the frontline regions. In the Sumy region, an airstrike hit a public bus, killing at least 9 people and injuring 7 others. That's what local authorities are telling us. Humanitarian partners supported impacted families and evacuated children of those killed and injured to safer areas within Ukraine. In the Donetsk region, civilians were killed and injured between airstrikes. The cities of Konstantinikva, Pokrovsk, and Lyman have been heavily affected. That's what local authorities are telling our colleagues on the ground. In Kherson, authorities reported casualties and damage to numerous homes. The attacks have also impacted humanitarian operations. In its latest access report, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the increased use of long-range combat drones, now striking up to 15 kilometers from the front lines, is worsening under access constraints. Incidents impacting humanitarian personnel, assets, and facilities rose to 37 in March and April, up from 27 in January and February of this year. Meanwhile, a new food and security assessment by WFP and FAO and the Kyiv School of Economics found that 1 in 3 families in frontline areas and bordering regions face moderate to severe food insecurity. Nearly 70% of families surveyed reported skipping meals or cutting health and education costs. Female-headed households and low-income households are among the most vulnerable. The report calls for urgent international support to stabilize food access. support agriculture, and protect livelihoods. And a quick note from Libya, where Libya's Presidency Council and the UN mission in Libya, UNSMIL, have established a truce committee building on the fragile peace reached last week. The committee, which met for the first time on Sunday, is focused on facilitating a permanent ceasefire with emphasis on protection of all civilians and to agree on security arrangements in Tripoli. UNSMIL welcomes the Presidency Council's leadership on its commitment to de-escalate tensions and foster peace. The committee, headed by the Chief of General Staff of the Libyan Army, General Mohammed al-Haddad, demonstrates a commitment from all sides to avoid further escalation and ensure that all parties abide with their obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. UNSMIL reiterates that the UN Security Council's concern over the reports of civilian casualty during this week's violence and calls for an immediate and unconditional permanent ceasefire. Those responsible for such attacks and non-compliance with truce arrangements and international humanitarian and human rights law must be held accountable. And just today, the Secretary General addressed the 78th World Assembly via video message. He stressed that now more than ever, our world needs a coherent global health architecture that responds rapidly to crises and threatens protection and well-being for all. Mentioning the WHO's pandemic agreement, the Secretary General urged WHO member states to make history to strengthen global preparedness against pandemics, to ensure equity and solidarity and responding to health threats, and to uphold the promise of health as a fundamental human right. He also urged WHO member states to match ambition with resources by strengthening investment in World Health Organization and ensuring the sustainability and predictability it needs to build a healthier, safer, and fairer world for all. We have a new, we have a new International Day on the books. Today is World Fair Play Day, a celebration dedicated to promoting sports practiced in the spirit of friendship, solidarity, tolerance, inclusion, and non-discrimination. Pam, you were very eager this morning, this afternoon.
Thank you, Steph. Yes, this afternoon. Can you give a little more granularity about the Israeli approval for UN assistance and aid in Gaza? Is there a ceasefire or a limited deconfliction?
No
ceasefire.
I think as you've seen, there's clearly
Right.
no ceasefire, which is something we've been calling for a long time.
And other UN agencies?
Hold on a second. My understanding is that there were 9 trucks that are in the process and may have crossed, but we need to be very clear. They've crossed from Israel proper into the area from which the UN can pick the supplies up in Gaza. That part has not yet happened, right? Given it's late in the day, it's very likely already dark or soon to be dark there. Because of security concerns, we cannot operate in those conditions and pick them up. There were 9 trucks, mostly with nutrition supplies. The Israeli authorities, as far as I understand it, told us that we had only 9 trucks and that they broadly had to carry nutrition supplies. To say that this is a drop in the ocean is a clear understatement, right? Of course, 9 trucks is better than no trucks, but we need a massive uptick of humanitarian aid. We need a massive arrival of food, of cooking oil, of fuel to meet these needs.
And just on other UN agencies?
It was WFP and UNICEF supplies.
And UNICEF.
Yep.
Thank you.
Deji?
Yes, I follow up on that question. First of all, when you said it's a limited humanitarian delivery, can we have a definition of what this limited means? Like, does Israel agree daily?
Limited means 9 trucks.
No,
that's
limited.
limited.
Is that daily basis? So
No.
day
I mean,
you
this
have
is
9
what we
trucks?
were told we could do today.
Only
right?
for today.
Yeah,
not,
this
not
is what we
every
call
day.
today. Hopefully there will be more tomorrow, right? But this drop by drop, truck by truck approach nowhere meets the needs of the civilians in Gaza.
And I want to confirm that Pam just asked about the escalation mechanism. There's no
Well, we
de-escalation.
very much hope that obviously.
So far,
no
no such
they-
mechanism approval.
Let me put it this way: the Israelis will know our trucks. They know our movements. We will we continue in a attempt to deconflict whatever movements that will be allowed.
This is what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a video. We must not reach a situation of famine, both from a practical and a diplomatic standpoint, which means that probably the Israeli government knows that what the report from UN last week is right, that the Gaza is facing a famine. What I want to ask is, they said it's a minimal humanitarian aid. Do you think for UN this minimal bar is reached? Like, does UN agree with this minimal
Well, I mean,
bar?
we agree that it's minuscule, that it's minimal, whatever other M word you want to use. It's clearly not enough. Gabriel, and then Michelle, then Benno.
Thanks, Steph. I'll follow up on that, then I have another question. I won't get into the number of truck situation, but clearly 9 trucks is pathetic, and it's to be seen, quite frankly, it's just propaganda by Israel to say they're letting quote-unquote aid in. Was there any consideration given to the
UN of not participating in this
We-
propaganda
we're
act by
not-
Israel?
We will continue to operate, right, as long as we can do it under our basic principles, which I think we reiterate to you every time. This aid will be distributed through our own mechanisms, through our own networks, which is acceptable to us. We do not have the luxury of saying, well, if it's only 9 trucks, we're not going to do it, right? It's clearly not enough, right? It will clearly put our staff at risk, right? It'll put it may even put the recipients at risk if they, given the anxiety that will be created by knowing that there are only so few trucks coming in. This is why we need to go back to a tried and true system, which worked. I think Mr. Fletcher was very clear on that on Friday.
But Israel hasn't agreed to that, Steph. They're basically saying they're using the UN as propaganda to allow a few trucks in, and then knowing that they're going to tell you guys in a few days, okay, we're done with you. We've now got this other system set up. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. You guys are okay with participating with that?
We do not have, let me put it this way, the intellectual luxury of saying no. But we have been very clear to our Israeli counterparts, and we remain in constant touch with them, that this is not enough, that this is putting people at risk. But as long as aid is distributed through our system, it will be distributed. But we've also been very clear that we will not bend on our principles, right? That we will not participate in the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation process, because that does not meet our principles.
Can I ask one very quick last one? It's a very important one. Over the weekend, UNRWA surpassed a very grim milestone. 300 UNRWA staff members have been killed by Israel over the weekend. What is the Secretary General's response to Israel continuing to kill your own staff?
It is not only condemnable and tragic for our colleagues, for their families, it also remains a very visible and understanding symbol of the risk that our own staff are taking every day to try to help their own people. Michelle, then Benno, and then we'll move down.
Thanks, Steph. You said I think Israel have only said 5 trucks have entered so far.
Yeah, I mean, I checked with our colleagues on the ground as we were talking. 9 were supposed to cross today. And cross again, let's be very clear, it's just crossing from Israel proper into kind of the pickup zone, right? But none of that aid has been picked up given the lateness of the day. So hopefully by the end of the day we'll know whether all the 9 that we were told to go in have actually gone in.
So following on from that, does the UN have the capacity, that the trucks and the people to go and pick that aid up tomorrow? Is it safe enough? How much aid needs to get in there to try to address?
Let's yes, we have the capacity to pick them up. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Every time aid is picked up, our colleagues take risks. One can only imagine the risk that each of these truck drivers that will go pick them up and drive them to a distribution point or to a UN warehouse will take. And they're willing to take it. But that's why we're saying that this sort of mechanism where it's a drip, 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 9 trucks today, who knows how many tomorrow, just keeps making the risk even greater. When, as Gabriel just pointed out, 300 of our staff have been killed recently.
And then, sorry, just 2 more questions. This new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation mechanism, Israel argues that there's a need for this because Hamas has been stealing aid. Does the UN have any evidence of that?
Look, it is intolerable for anyone to steal aid, whether it is from armed groups, whether it is from Hamas, whether it is from criminal enterprises.
Have they been doing that though?
They have been looting, right? Often by armed men. As again, I think as I've said it before, we don't always. When somebody comes at you and points a gun at you, you make the decisions to. You take the decision you need to take to save your own life without asking questions. What lowers the risk of looting is having more aid in, right? I think we all have to put ourselves in the shoes of people who do not have enough food, and if they see one truck go by, not even knowing what's on the truck and not knowing if there'll be another truck, people will do what they need to do to survive. If you're able to flood the area with humanitarian aid, you're lowering that risk.
And then just one last question on the foundation and its plan. Obviously, the UN has said that it doesn't meet sort of humanitarian principles, standards. Can you be a little more specific about that for our outside audience? What does that
first
mean?
of all,
What are
we
the
do not
key
think
issues with
that
the plan?
setting up a limited number of distribution points, forcing people to move in Gaza to move to get it, it also just heightens risk. We don't know what criteria they will use to distribute that aid. I know I always sound like a broken record, but there is a system that worked during the ceasefire. There's a system that met basic needs of the population, right? That system, we can go back to that system. We have wheels that turn. We do not need to reinvent yet another wheel. Mr. Schwinghammer.
Thank you, Mr. Dujarric. One follow-up, just for context for our audience. 9 trucks, not enough, obviously, but like how many trucks would be enough? Are we talking about dozens, hundreds?
Hundreds. I mean, I think, listen, despite the lack of international journalists in Gaza, which continues to be the case, which hampers your audience's understanding what is going on. We have seen the pictures. You've heard the testimony from our colleagues. To say that 9 is not enough is it just a tremendous understatement.
Okay. And you talked about Mr. Fletcher being really clear about the situation in Gaza. The Israeli ambassador interpreted his words as he claimed that Israel committed genocide. Is that also your reading?
That is not what he claimed.
Okay, but he used the words genocide and he said we have to prevent it from happening. So does the SG think we are on a way to genocide?
The issue of whether or not there is a genocide will be decided for the UN by a court of law. What we are seeing is a human suffering on an unimaginable scale that keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
But the wording of Mr. Fletcher insinuates that we are on a pathway that leads to that place. So do you agree with his words? or no?
I think I've answered your question to the best of my limited ability. Please. And then Yvonne. And then I'll come back.
First question. President Putin and President Trump just concluded talks. They lasted about 2 hours, and Russian leader called them substantive and helpful. What is your reaction about these talks?
Well, listen, I think the fact that there were phone conversations, conversations between President Trump and President Zelensky, President Trump and President Putin in itself is to be welcomed. Our stand continues to be that we will support any effort that would lead to an end to the war in Ukraine based on the principles of the UN, the principles of the Charter, territorial integrity of Ukraine, and all relevant Security Council, all relevant UN resolutions. Ms. Murray, RTE.
So back to the trucks, there is some confusion now whether it's 9 or 5, as Michelle was pointing out. So you've been told 9.
I do not contradict the confusion.
Okay.
What I'm saying, and my understanding, and again, one of the reasons I was late, I was speaking to a colleague in Jerusalem. 9 trucks were permitted to go in. It is unclear to me at this point whether all 9 have actually crossed the crossing into that pickup zone, right?
Okay.
Hopefully within the next hour we will have the final count. What I'm confirming is at this point none of the 8 has been picked up,
right?
And
okay.
doubtfully that the 8 will be picked up today.
Okay, because Kogat is saying 5. Okay. And just returning to one of the points that was made earlier on, was there any internal discussion as to whether to engage in this, which could be considered a charade, given that only 5 trucks or 9 trucks, when the need is over hundreds, as you just pointed out?
There is, of course, a reputational risk. Let's be honest, right? For the UN, but we've always been saying that we will. First of all, we need aid in, that we will participate in aid that we're able to distribute under our own principles, and this is the case, right? We need to see more. We have a responsibility to the people of Gaza, to the civilians in need. We have to uphold our own ideals. This kind of we were able to, we feel, to do both. At huge risk to us, both physically for our staff, reputational risk, like you say. So it is an impossible situation to be in. But as I said, I don't think we had the luxury to say no at this point.
Okay, and one other question: during the 11 weeks of this total blockade on food and water and medical supplies, how much aid has been spoilt that's been waiting to enter Gaza? Do you have any details about that?
No, it's a very good point. We can check with our World Food Program colleagues, especially because the food is the one that. But obviously, perishable items are just that. Stefano, and then we'll come back north. I did.
It looks like from what you say, looks like the situation gets slightly better. Is it possible? You say that, but instead it looks like we probably risking to have another Sudan soon if things don't change. So my question is, what is the Secretary General position on the role of Prime Minister Dbeibah? Does he believe the current government of national unity can still lead Libya to election? A senior representative of Tripoli-based government told me last week that only the Trump administration can resolve the situation. Does the UN Secretary General share that view?
Look, the Libyan people themselves need to resolve the situation. In any country where there is a civilian conflict, right, where ruling ruling elites, ruling parties are fighting each other militarily anywhere in the world. And there are quite a few examples of that. The solution needs to come from the country itself. We, as a basic principle, are here to assist those countries in coming up with nationally led and nationally owned processes. And that is our stand on Libya, on Yemen and Sudan and a lot of other places.
Yeah, but just a quick follow-up. Because in Sudan, a situation is not the same, but end up to be similar. There is a civil war going on between two factions. And the UN was there, was trying to make, not this to happen, and failed. So,
well, who failed? Who failed?
The UN failed to make sure.
I think the Libyan leaders failed to come together.
I was talking about Sudan now. Okay. What failed? Okay, we have a situation in Sudan that we know what it is. So the question is, what are the instructions that the Secretary General has given to UNSMIL, any special representative, to try to prevent now, if we're still on time, what happened?
To work with Libyan leaders, with Libyan civil society, in trying to ensure that all those in charge put the interest of the Libyan people first and foremost. Dulcie, pass blue.
Yeah, do you know what these nutrition supplies are? Are these the peanut butter things? Or?
I mean, they are. It's not. It is, I think, infant formula, nutrition supplies. It is not flour or cooking oil. That's what I know.
So
you should check with UNICEF and World Food Program to know exactly what it is.
So is the UN communicating with this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation at all?
I'm not aware of any direct contacts that we've had with that leadership.
And is the UN aware that they are actually on the ground now? Because there are some tweets suggesting they're...
I mean, we're aware of the situation in Gaza pretty well.
Okay, so... to go to the idea that Israel says that the aid is falling into hands of Hamas, and one of the plans of this GHF is to do facial recognition. So would the UN consider any of these ideas to alleviate these accusations?
I mean, we have been distributing aid in Gaza for quite some time, and we've been doing successfully, and we want to go back to that. Madame.
So going back to the 9 trucks, I mean, Israeli Minister of Finance, Smotrich, basically said today in a speech that they will wipe Gaza out and that they're just allowing a minimum amount of aid to go in, so the international community would provide Israel with protection. He said this in a speech. I mean, it's basically an admission of what this is. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, we've seen this sort of this sort of horrendous apocalyptic rhetoric before. As I said, our responsibility, our humanitarian colleagues in Gaza, their responsibility is to do whatever they can within the principles of how we work to help the people in Gaza. And as I've said, 9 is not enough. I said to Yvonne that there's a huge reputational risk for us as well. But we had to take it. And I think like you said, the statements from various Israeli officials have been very, very transparent. Michelle Reuters.
Thank you, Steph. Tom Fletcher said that much more aid needs to be let in starting tomorrow morning. Has Israel committed to let aid in tomorrow?
I mean, we understand there may be another round of trucks allowed in tomorrow, but what we need, again, is not a drop by drop, truck by truck, item by item. We need massive flow of humanitarian aid.
Have they indicated how many trucks they might let in tomorrow?
There's been some indication, but I can tell you it is not enough.
Doesn't?
I can tell you that it is not enough.
Let me change the topic.
Why?
There's a document from the U.S. Department of Commerce warning that using Huawei, a Chinese company's AI chips, may violate U.S. export controls, even outside the United States. So this assertion was based on unilateral sanctions as well as extraterritorial jurisdiction. Does the UN believe these kind of measures comply with the international law? And what does the Secretary General's stance on the potential fragmentation of global tech supply chain?
I really have no comment on this because first I've heard of it and I'm not sure we will have a comment on it.
So what
Oh,
does...
but
Go ahead.
okay, what I can tell you is that the Secretary General has been very concerned about a fracturing of the global economy, of a decoupling of the global economy. And as you know better than I, Deji, he's been saying, he said it, I think, first a few years ago, before this ongoing debate.
Let me bring this issue to a broader picture. What does the UN's view on the rights of developing countries to access critical technologies under such kind of restrictive policy?
We believe that there is an architecture within the UN system to facilitate global trade, and it should be used. Hold on. Yes, please, and then we'll go to the screen because I see hands are waving.
Hi, Steph. Munir Al-Samra for CNN. On the 9 aid trucks that are going in, can you talk a little bit more in detail on the disbursement methods? What initiatives are you guys taking to avoid another like flower massacre incident?
Well, I mean, listen, once the trucks are, the material is picked up, they will be sent to UN warehouses, and we'll use the same system of distribution through partners, partner NGOs and UN agencies that we've been used in the past. But as I said, given the infinitesimally small number of trucks and supplies that are going in, it's going to create outsized expectations, which only increases the security risk both for our own staff and for the recipients.
And do you know any specific measures you're taking?
Well, I mean, UN staff are unarmed, right? Our protection comes from the community. And this situation is the risks, the security risks are very high. Abdelhamid, then Joe.
I have 3 questions, and I hope I will not be muted before I finish, as always happened. And I know it's not you who mute me. My first question about the statement by Smotrich when he said, these trucks will be followed by drones to know where they're going. Is that acceptable to the UN?
I haven't seen that statement. The only thing that is acceptable to us is that we be allowed to deliver the aid freely based on our principles. Your second question.
Second question, the Ministry of Health in Gaza said that in the last 3 days, 500 Palestinians were killed, an average of 1 Palestinian every 15 minutes. I haven't heard the word condemnation, although you mentioned hundreds being killed. You spoke about killing also. The journalists, the humanitarian workers, UNRWA staff, but the word condemned is missing. Why is that?
We've repeatedly condemned the killing of civilians, including our own staff. And I can tell you, tragically, 3 more UNRWA staff were killed today. Yes, you have one more question, Abdelhamid, then we'll move to Joe.
Officials we haven't heard from Sigrid Kaag and Virginia Gamba. And what's going on in Gaza concerned both senior staff. Where are they? Why they are silent?
Virginia Gamba, I think will send in her report to the Security Council usually in June or early July. That is being worked on. I was in touch with Sigrid today. She continues her contacts with people, with leaders in the region, leaders in Israel. I can tell you she is extremely busy at work trying to push forward on a positive agenda. I think Mr. Fletcher has been very clearly outspoken. The Secretary General has spoken. Just because you haven't heard statements from Ms. Cog doesn't mean that she is not active at work. But I think when the Secretary General speaks, it covers her. When Mr. Fletcher, as representative of the humanitarian system, it also covers her work. One doesn't need to issue statements every 5 minutes to prove that they are hard at work fulfilling their mandate. Mr. Klein.
Yes, I want to go back to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. In response to some of the objections that have been raised by UN officials, they have indicated that they are planning a rollout across Gaza, more distribution sites throughout Gaza, and as they roll this out, to set up secure transport for delivery of aid wherever they can. They've also offered to partner with the UN agencies on an ongoing basis to secure maximum capabilities and capacities for delivery of aid. So my question is, you mentioned concern about the UN's reputation. Aren't you concerned, or Secretary General concerned, that by just rejecting the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's outreach out of hand, that you may be damaging UN's reputation?
I don't think we don't need another partner. We don't need a newly minted humanitarian partner to tell us how to do our work in Gaza. There is a system which has worked, and it has worked successfully. What we need in Gaza is what the Secretary General has been called for, a ceasefire, right? Until we get that ceasefire, we need to get humanitarian aid in. We need to get the hostages out. We understand there are discussions going on with the help of the mediators, with the help of the US, the help of Qatar, the help of Egypt, to get Israel and Hamas to agree. We need that to happen. In the meantime, we will continue to do our work proudly under very, very difficult circumstances, very dangerous circumstances. As I mentioned, 3 more of our colleagues were killed today, 2 of them on an airstrike in what had been an UNRWA school. But we do not need to bend on our principles on how we do our work. Thank you all. On that, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dennis, please.
Yeah, another topic on Ukrainian church. So there is well-known continuous crackdown on Ukrainian Orthodox Church by Ukrainian authorities. When will UN and its institution will address this issue, as well as attempts of European countries to intervene in work of religious organizations that have ties to Russian Orthodox Church?
I can't speak for the European institutions. What I can tell you is that we firmly believe in everyone's right to worship and for religious organizations to exist and work freely. Merci. À bientôt. À demain. And it's only